Hello, my name is Randy Williams. I'm bringing you Keiretsu Forum Presents. I'm a proud member of our community that's grown to 47 locations globally. We started these shows a year ago, and it was 42 there, so have enjoyed our growth. Every month on our show, we try to inspire, educate you, our viewers, on various aspects of angel investing. We are going global with a conversation today, talking about what institutional and also foreign investors are looking for in U.S. technologies. And we have an expert to my left. He's also my partner in our family of venture funds. Matthew, if you could tell the viewers a little bit about your background and then more specifically the topic today.
Thanks a lot, Randy. Yes, well, over the last 30 years or so, I've spent a lot of time working with international companies, corporations looking to expand into the US or to gain access to interesting opportunities, technologies and products to take to their home markets. And I've also worked with a lot of sovereign entities, countries and regions and states around the world on their digital economy strategies. And all of that's coming together in today's topic about the types of technologies international investors want access to.
And let's name the top three. Let's be precocious, and obviously investors all over the world we have strategic investors, we have angel investors, but what do you think the top three technologies that you feel that investors are looking at in the U.S. today that are overseas?
Well, broadly, we're talking about areas within information technology, so those continue to be cloud access, technologies broadly defined, enterprise and consumer-oriented. We're seeing the rise of a lot of artificial intelligence. We're seeing the rise of robotics and remote control systems, the Internet of Things and the sensor revolution, all of these things in that space. New viewing technologies like virtual reality and to some extent augmented reality are also getting a lot of attention. In life sciences, it continues to be the continuing rollout of genomic medicine in its various flavors, personalized medicine, other things. And then we're also seeing, obviously, heightened interest in clean technologies, new materials, and new approaches to fuel all of our information technology needs globally.
So global investors, are they looking mostly on the West Coast, or are they looking all throughout the United States? Where is their focus?
Right. So the digital economy and innovation is certainly not a US-specific trend. New innovation hubs are springing up throughout the world, and there's no monopoly on innovation. At the same time, it is true that the West Coast of the US is one of the leading innovation centers in the world. And we do drive a lot of new technologies that then get deployed globally. And I would say that even though there are pockets of innovation in New York and Boston, in Texas, the north coast of the US, all the way from Vancouver and Seattle in the north all the way down to San Diego, is a real hotbed for innovation.
Yes. So what are we speaking about today? Are we speaking about governments interested in our technology, or investors, or strategic investors? So let's narrow down the focus.
Yes. I think for the purposes of today, let's focus on overseas investors who may want to make direct investments or investments through funds into U.S. technology startups.
And let's talk about the myriad of ways that they can gain access through the myriad of opportunities, whether it be early stage funds or access to the tier 1 VCs or whatever.
Exactly. I think we'll go through all of those mechanisms, and maybe I should just paint the picture of what they are, and then we can talk about some of the pros and cons of each. Obviously, starting very, very early, most startups raise most of their initial capital from their founders and their friends and family, and that doesn't tend to be a place where overseas investors can gain much access. Over the last few years, we've seen the rise of incubators and accelerators, and some of those do welcome overseas investors to participate in investing in the companies passing through them. We've seen, obviously, the rise of angel groups, including Keiretsu Forum, the world's largest angel group, and in fact now the most active investor in early-stage US technology companies. And so angel groups have begun to think about how to bring overseas investors into their networks and give them access, and we can talk about some of those approaches. We have the traditional venture capital community, and most venture capitalists will be prepared to accept limited partners, typically institutional investors, to invest through their funds into the companies they back. And then as we get into the expansion capital and pre-IPO phase, the amounts of money being raised become larger and larger, and we see more and more overseas investors, both professional investors, corporate investors, sovereign funds, and so on, having a role to play. And then one other thing we probably should touch on is the rise of crowdfunding platforms, which have also begun to be ways in which overseas investors can participate. And there are pros and cons to all of these things.
So let's focus on early stage. Let's say a foreign investor has the insight to go early versus trying to invest where the valuation is unicorn status, over $1 billion, and that valuation can change dramatically, go down. How does a foreign investor get in early?
Yes. Well, so for the very largest international investors, we've seen them beginning to set up operations in the U.S. directly. So we'll see very large corporations, the Huaweis of the world, the buyers from Europe, actually setting up teams of people, Deutsche Telekom, Orange, and others, here in Silicon Valley, in the Pacific West Coast and other parts of the US. And they will hire local people, or they'll transfer their employees from overseas. And these people will scout out technologies and sometimes make direct investments. So that, for very large companies, that's an approach. For sovereign funds, similarly, sovereign funds will often have a local presence, a small number of people here in the US looking for direct investments. Obviously, that doesn't really make sense for most overseas investors. They want the access, they want to invest, but they don't want to commit dedicated resources. And at that point, their choices are the other things we described. For early stage, they're typically going to be limited partners in funds that other people will manage. And those can be angel funds, incubator funds, or venture capital funds. And it's a question of what stage do they want to go after and what type of access do they want to get.
And when we're looking at strategic, why don't you define what a strategic investor looks like?
So a typical strategic investor is someone who's operating a business overseas or internationally, and they'll have some current business that they're trying to support or expand with new opportunities, whether those be technologies, products, or services, and other things. So they're making an investment not just for the financial return, they're making an investment because they see it as benefiting their own business or expanding their own business. And so you can imagine if I am for example, a European pharmaceutical company, I may be looking for new technologies and new breakthroughs that I can expand globally. Or in some cases, I might be an international automotive company and I'll be looking for leading edge technologies which are getting traction in the US environment that I think can be expanded internationally. So that's the typical profile of a strategic investor. They don't all have to be international, multinational companies. So sometimes it's a company that has a strong presence in a local market and believes that they're the best go-to-market partner for a technology company that's going to eventually want to expand into those other marketplaces.
And do you feel, I feel, the world's flat. I see great opportunities globally as we travel. We have 47 locations that I go to throughout the world. And
yep.
I got to get to, we just opened Korea this week, and I need to be in Seoul probably the next 6 months. I'm looking forward to it. But we see great opportunities globally. Are we precocious to think that we have, and this is being filmed in Silicon Valley, that we have the epicenter of great deal flow? Or is there great opportunities? How does a foreign investor just want to invest in U.S.? They want to invest globally, don't they?
Well, it's a bit of both. I said at the outset, I think there's no monopoly on innovation, and there are great opportunities surfacing everywhere. But the U.S. is the largest market economy, And when you have a new technology that's getting traction in the US, it's already got a huge market that it can exploit. So it's got an advantage relative to perhaps a new product or a service or a startup company whose own addressable market is very small.
Yes.
I do think that the world has become more flat in the sense that the digital economy allows a company to serve many markets right at the outset from any part of the world. But on the other hand, I think that the local knowledge, local access, local relationships continue to be very important. And that's one of the reasons why a US technology company may well want to have a partner in an overseas environment to help them expand into those marketplaces. And so for US technology companies, as an example, China, the Asian nations, the EU are very large marketplaces, but very hard to serve extremely well from one single location here in the US. And so oftentimes we'll see US technology companies at some point saying, I'd like a strategic partner to open up a marketplace, create relationships for me, and sometimes help me modify my products and technologies to make sure they work in other environments.
So a lot of the strategics, a lot of the investors are coming here because we're a consumer society and it's about distribution. And obviously we have, as you said, we have great innovation hubs throughout the United States,
right.
But they're also exploiting, obviously, our consumer base.
That's correct. And so whilst today we're not talking about the other part of this equation, which is bringing overseas technologies to the US market. Today we're just focused on helping overseas investors access and invest in US technologies. Obviously it is a two-way flow.
Sure.
But I think what's very interesting is we are certainly in a phase where we're seeing a lot more interest from overseas investors. And we quickly went through all the different approaches. We didn't talk very much about the pros and cons. In the past, an overseas investor would have tried to invest in a top-tier venture capital firm. Today, most of those venture capital firms are oversubscribed, the very best ones, and they don't want any more limited partners. They have more capital than they can deploy, especially early stage. Increasingly, their capital is going to late-stage investment opportunities. So practically, if you're an overseas investor and you want access and the opportunity to invest in a top-quartile venture capital firm, you can't get it. Incubators and accelerators, meanwhile, are very, very early stage where the failure rate is very high. And so what we've begun to do at Keiretsu Capital is think about how do we allow international investors to invest in the 150 or thereabouts technology companies we back every year. And we're doing that through funds that we're creating at Keiretsu Capital specifically to help overseas investors invest in US technology companies.
And so if they do participate in our funds, what will they have a diversification of many asset classes?
Yes, pretty much any international investor who wants to invest in any of the main areas, information technology, life sciences, clean technology, fintech, they can gain access to a diversified set of portfolio companies simply because we are the world's largest angel group and we're backing more companies than anyone else.
Well, thank you, Matthew. Very insightful, and I look forward to talking to you in the future. I think we're going to be focused on Asia next when we talk about what Chinese investors are looking for. Thank you so much for coming today.
And thank you, Randy.